Welcome to comparing box plots. In this video, we will be looking at two box plots at the same time. So our context, two classes recently took the same exam. The box plots for the scores of the two classes are shown below. So up top is class A, down below is class B. And we will just have a whole series of questions about these box plots or based off these box plots. I apologize, I will be doing a lot of scrolling up and down. Our first question, which class has the higher median? So again, this is the line through the box. So if we look at our data, here's the first median versus the median for A. It looks like class A has the higher median. Next up, which class has the highest score overall? So this one, the highest score, we're looking at the maximum. I should say had the single highest score. So we're looking for the maximum, whichever class had the higher maximum. So here, class A had a maximum of about 47, 48, versus class B's maximum was 50. So I would say that class B had the single highest score. Next up, which class had the greater variability based on the range? So the range is the overall width of your plot from min to max, right? So we're looking at the overall width. From min to max. Scrolling back up, it looks like class A goes from 20 to about 47. So the range for A, we're looking at about 47 minus 20, or 27. The range for B, that goes from 25 to 50. So we are looking at about 50 minus 25, or 25. So it looks like class A has the larger range. Next up, we want to do which class has the greater variability based on the IQR. So our IQR, we are looking at the the width of the box. Scrolling back up. We don't even need to do any calculations here. It is clear that class B's box is wider. Class B's box spans lower and higher than class A's box. So class B has the larger IQR. So notice from number 3 and number 4, depending on how we measure variability, we will get different answers for which one is more spread out. It's more common to use IQR just because it kind of gives us a sense to how clumped the main component of the data is. Next up, what are the typical intervals of scores for the two classes? So typical interval, we go from Q1 to Q3. In other words, the box. So we will need to do this for class A and class B. I copied the box plots here, so we will just look down below. So class A, our box looks to start at about 35 and end maybe at 43. So typical scores were between 35 and 43. Class B looks to start at about 33 and end at 45. So 33 to 45. Continuing on, which class had a higher percentage of students score below 35? So here's 35. And we want to know which class had a higher percentage of students score to the left of that. So below 35, we are looking to the left of that 35. And here it's important to remember our 25%, 25%, 25%. So this entire tail is 25% of the data. So for class A, it's just that first 25% of the data that is below 35. Class B, we have 25%, and then we have some extra. So we don't have an entire additional 25%. The line cuts through that second quarter, but we do have some. So for class A, it's just 25% versus for class B, we have 25% plus some extra. And so class B has the higher percentage. Next up, we have to answer, did either class have any outliers? So to do this, again, we need to look at our box, do 1.5 copies of our box, and go to the left and the right of our Q1 and Q3. So here is our box, our IQR. If we do 1.5 copies for class B, just the one copy we already go clear to the right, and just the one copy we already go clear to the left. So class B clearly has no outliers. For class A, we have our IQR. Going one copy to the right, we have no outliers above. Going one copy to the left, and then half, we're just sort of borderline on the edge. We may have an outlier or not. So class A might have an outlier on the bottom. My box plot's not precise enough for us to tell for sure. But I would guess that there is one. Okay. So class A, we were guessing was around 8 to 9 for its IQR. So that would be 1.5 of that would be less than 15, which will not get us far enough down. So it looks like class A has an outlier on the bottom. So class A has an outlier on the lower end. And finally, our job is to write a paragraph comparing the performance of the two classes. You will be doing something similar in your first project, where you will be comparing the spending per student on K through 12 education in all Eastern states versus Western states. So going back through what we've written, Class A had the higher median versus Class B had the single highest score. Class A had the lower minimum. Class B's typical scores were more spread out. We had more students perform poorly in Class B. So even despite the fact that Class B had the single highest score, my daughter's singing for you. I might argue that overall Class A performed slightly better, or I might argue that they performed fairly similarly since their two boxes overlap a lot, right? In fact, Class A's box typical scores is within Class B's box. So it's kind of up to you how you want to argue. There's not necessarily one correct argument. In this case, I might argue that the two classes performed fairly similarly. All right, so Class A and Class B performed similarly on the exam. Typical students in Class A scored between typical students in Class A scored between 35 and 43, while typical students, whoops. Right. Class A scored, or typical students in Class A scored between 35 and 43, while typical students in Class B scored between 33 and 45. The median for Class A was, let's see, what compared to Class B? Looks like the median for Class A was around 2 to 3, probably about 2 points higher than the median for Class B, 2 to 3 points higher. Then the median for Class B Class B had greater variability about the median. Based off the IQR. And then if we go on shape, if anything, class B is slightly skewed right versus class A is slightly skewed left. So class B, class B's scores were slightly skewed right. While class A's were slightly skewed left. With an outlier at the bottom. That's just some basic things we might say as we compare the two classes. So that's it for now for comparing box plots.